I'm just letting a few more people in from the waiting room, but hi everyone, welcome. So glad you could join us today.
It's nice to see some familiar faces, some familiar names, even in such a hectic time. It's good to be with you all.
We can escape into some garlic in a minute.
While we're waiting, if you all can type in your name and which school you're from in the chat, we'd love to just have everyone get to know who's in the room with us.
Hey, Nicole, I heard there was a problem with one of your four-way splitters in the garden cleanup. I got a message from
Casey?
From Casey, yeah. She was looking for a little...
What's a four-way splitter? I don't know what that is.
Where the hoses, where all the hoses connect and split off. It looked like one of them broke.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I'm not sure.
For the spring.
Yeah, it could have. I have a question. I know I asked this like last year. Whatever happened with the grant from CPS? Is that just not happening?
That's a great question. I haven't seen one of those mass emails come through in a little while, so I think that's a good thing. But my understanding was that most schools received their stuff. I know, so Harold Chapman is no longer in that position. CPS is actually hiring a new school garden coordinator and I think there's two positions. I think one is a manager, one's a coordinator position. Anyway, I would follow up directly with Harold and don't reply all, but follow up directly with Harold and see what the holdup is and if there's a way to get what you need.
Okay.
Hey Karen, hey Tiffany, welcome. If you can add your name and what school you're joining from into the chat, we'll get started with some garlic in just a second. All right, I think we're ready to begin. Folks who are joining late can enter and get caught up. So we're going to start off today with a short presentation on how I plant garlic. People plant garlic all different ways. People do all sorts of things in the garden all different ways, but I'm going to share my garlic methods. And then we'll talk a little bit about a roots ready, set, grow lesson. And then we will get into some chat and talk and hear some of the reflection ideas y'all are thinking about coming out of this conversation, or any new ideas you'd like to contribute as we're thinking about garden and food-based education in this crazy remote learning world that we are in. So to get started, I'm just going to share a couple tools that I like to use for this work. And this applies not just to planting garlic, but a lot of different crops. So the first thing is this kind of like cultivator. A rake works great too, but I really use this a lot to loosen up the top, 3-4 inches of soil. Not to dig down deep, but just to make sure the soil is loose and nice and easy for us to plant the garlic right into the soil. The other tool I use is this. It's just a curtain rod or a closet pole or something like that I put a dull point on, and this is called a dibble. And you can kind of see I use this to to poke holes in the garden really quickly. That way I can make sure that the holes for the garlic are just easy to make, and I can plant the whole bed really quickly. So these are the two main tools I use. And now let's get into the garlic. So here is a hardneck garlic. You can see it's got this hard neck. It's dried, it's cured. This one actually was harvested really late, so it's missing all of its paper. All of that has decomposed and broken off. This is another variety that was harvested on time and has still all of its papery skins, the leaves still attached. And I just want to point out, while we're at this stage, a little bit of garlic anatomy, and this will connect to some of the roots lessons that we're going to do later. You can see the old dry roots at the bottom of the garlic coming out. And then if you look really closely, right here, you can see those are the brand new roots coming out of each individual clove of garlic. The clove of garlic itself is actually a leaf. The stem is that kind of woody piece at the bottom of the clove of garlic. The roots are these roots that come out. And then everything above that is a different variation of a leaf. The green leaves that grow are obviously leaves, but then the paper is a dried leaf sheath. And then the bulb itself is a modified leaf. It's a energy storage resource for the garlic. So this is the garlic we're going to be planting today. I can come over here and show you all a little bit of the garden. I can also turn on my phone and switch the camera so you all can see kind of what's happening down here. You can see I already used my dibble, or used my fingers to poke holes right here in the garden. And all I'm gonna do is take my garlic head, and you can kind of see I'm breaking off these cloves straight from this head of garlic. And I'm just gonna put them all in, root side down, obviously. So these roots at the bottom, the point pointing up, I'm just gonna stick them down right into the holes. And I'm not gonna cover them until I have them all planted. So I do that because I wanna know where they are, and it's very easy to lose track of what you've planted. So this is kind of entire space. Right now I have this entire seabed halfway kind of set up for planting. This gives me about 30 heads of garlic that could grow in half of this learning garden bed. I'll come back later today and do the rest. Before I cover them up though, I've got just a Dr. Earth pretty even fertilizer, all-purpose organic fertilizer. I'm just gonna sprinkle a tiny bit over each of the bulbs. This is not a high nitrogen fertilizer, so it won't encourage a lot of leaf growth. It'll really just support mostly root growth and stem growth, kind of the bulb growth during the winter. Now that I have that all planted, I'm just gonna cover these up. Give it a nice even pat down. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is I've got this truck of shredded leaves here. These just came from my landscaper. You could use straw, any mulch really that you like. And I'm gonna cover up all of the garlic that I just planted. I'm gonna actually do this quite quickly. You want a really heavy, nice layer of mulch on top of garlic. It likes to be protected from the winter fluctuations in temperatures, the freeze and thaw cycles. So this is a good 6 inches of leaves right on top. And for those of you who have issues with the soil depth in your garden, it's really nice to add a good 6 inches of leaves. These are going to decompose over the winter, and by spring they'll be just a couple inches deep, and by July when you're harvesting the garlic, it's likely you won't recognize any leaves in the garden at all. So a similar technique is going to be used over here in this container. And actually I'm going to take this whole head of garlic, and I'll break the stem because we don't need more. And I'm going to plant the whole head of garlic together the same way that I would plant the the bulbs that I just did, root side down, stem and leaf side up. And what that's gonna do is grow a whole bunch of garlic all tight together in one bunch. And if I walk over here to my garden, you can see what that is gonna look like in the spring. Over here, these are garlics that I just harvest, and you can see the old stem from the plant here.
Sam, we're losing your audio as you go away from your computer.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. So here's the old stem. And here is all of the bulbs of garlic growing their own plants here right in the garden. So this is a great way that we can harvest this whole bunch of garlic to eat right now or to eat early in the spring before our garlic is even close to being ready. I should probably have gotten a shovel for this, but it's kind of cool. You can see that is the head of garlic down here. And so you can eat all of these greens the same way that you would eat a green onion. And so that way you can enjoy some nice off-season garlic in the fall and in the early spring before your main harvest is ready. So that is how I plant my garlic in my garden. And we can ask some questions. Get into a little bit of discussion of that garlic later on in the conversation. One thing I did want to mention though, before we move on to a garlic video, is we also are going to want to mulch the bag that we filled the same way that we mulched the garlic in the garden bed. So here, I'm just going to add some more leaves to the surface of this container. And then I'm also going to want to store it in a location that is sheltered from a little bit of the fluctuations of temperature that happen in the winter. So I would put it, against a brick wall, maybe behind some yard furniture, in a garage, under a porch, someplace that's just going to be a little bit sheltered from the weather. Because it's a small container, it's not going to be insulated the way that garlic would be if it were planted directly in the earth. And so it's a great way to help make sure that garlic thrives and survives during the winter. Thanks so much, everyone. And now I'll pass it off to Alana's going to show us a quick video of the garlic from the farm that she was just at yesterday to collect the garlic that we'll be distributing to all of you next week.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So yesterday I was lucky enough to actually get to go to the garlic farm to pick up garlic for all of your gardens. And I was just curious, is anyone planning to plant garlic in a grow bag or in a container at home? Miss Walls? Cool.
And will we be able to also plant it? Because we do have our garden beds at school, even though we're not going as often. Would it do anything without having to be watered?
Yeah, that is the beauty of garlic, is that you kind of put it in the bed, let it rest for the winter, and then it's one of the first things to come up in the spring. So it'd be a perfect, it'd be a really good thing to plant kind of in this uncertain time, so that you have something to come back to if you're able to come back in the spring.
I'll do it at the school too then.
Yeah, so the school is a great option. So feel free to, if you're thinking of planting garlic in your home or at the school, feel free to add in the chat what your plans are. And I'm going to share my screen so you can get a quick taste of our garlic farm and grower. This is Dan.
For this year's planting for the...
So just a quick background. This is Dan, who grows farm at Willow Garlic Growers. and he's going to tell us about the varieties that we have in store for you.
Big Green Gardens, we have two varieties, Hey Husky, which is a lovely purple stripe. We'll see if I can get a little bit of that purple marbling in there. And this has right around 8 cloves. And then the other variety that you'll be planting is a cultivar called a Northern White, which is a porcelain variety. It has nice, nice, healthy little robust cloves and very tasty. So this will be this year's planting.
And where exactly are we here?
Okay, we are in Willow Valley, which is in the northwest corner of the state. And we're at the very southeast corner of the driftless area, which is very mineral rich soil conditions. So it's a wonderful place to grow food. And so back when the last glacier passed through, it missed this little area and went around us. And so we have some very, very beautiful topography and mineral content in our soils, which you will taste in our garlic.
And if any teachers are interested in visiting your farm,
they're welcome to come. Just get a hold of me and we can arrange times for people to come out. And it would be wonderful to bring students as well, teachers and students. And we're 2 hours, as you know, 2 hours and a few minutes away from the city, but it's a manageable day trip.
wonderful.
And that would be wonderful. I'd love to have the teachers and kids come out and see what we do over there. What you've been doing for all day planting gardens.
Wonderful. I'm going to take this camera just so they can see the fields.
Oh, good.
Little sped up version. So this here is where all the garlic is planted for the year. We are in the month of November, which is garlic planting season. And these varieties of garlic actually need the cold weather to start dividing and grow. So it is time to plant the garlic. And this is what it looks like kind of on a larger scale, much larger than our school gardens. And what we did today was we planted 20 garlic cloves in all of these rows here. And then the rows will be mulched with straw to keep the soil protected over the winter. So you now have virtually visited the farm that your garlic comes from. And as Dan said in the video, he welcomes field trips and is a really wonderful person to visit and get to know. So that is an option. If you're interested in being connected to Dan, let us know and we can make that connection. And he is at the Logan Square Farmers Market. So now I'm going to pass it off to Dianna to share a virtual lesson with us all.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to be here with you today. I don't know if this happens for any of you, but anytime I need to be on an important time or space, everything happens. My phone is ringing, the dog needed to go out, my partner came home. But anyway, everybody's set now. And so I'm ready to be here with you, something about this time of the day. My name is Dianna Zeegers and I work out of our national office in Colorado. And what I'm really excited to get to do with you today is just talk through a little bit about the Ready, Set, Grow series in a way that maybe helps illuminate how this learning can continue during this time when we're not directly with students in most of our gardens across the country. I know in some previous workshops, we went through how to access some of these materials, and some of you may have already accessed them or been into the virtual classrooms. At the end, if we have time and there are folks who aren't sure how to do that, I would be happy to walk you through that. It's very, very simple, and everything I'm going to show for you today is free to use, and we would love for kids to have the opportunity to continue their garden-based learning into the winter and spring. So with that, Ready, Set, Grow is our K-8 curriculum. And what I hope to do today is to walk you through sort of what this series looks like and how potentially this could still be delivered in a virtual environment. So with that, I am going to do a screen share, and I apologize, I have two screens going, so that's why I have to look around the one. Okay, great. And are you all able to see my screen? Can I just get a thumbs up from our team? Yeah, great. Okay, so what I am showing you is a bundle. I'm not sure if you've received this bundle yet, but we'll share it out with you following this webinar if you haven't received it. This is just a couple of things that I'll be featuring today. And then, of course, you can actually just access the whole thing via our website. So what I'm going to show you first is the original lesson that we're doing today. It was, sorry, that's not it. This was designed at a time when we weren't even aware that something like COVID could exist. And so it's in PDF form. And so sorry, this is not what I want it to be. Oh, here it is. When I was in the classroom, I would often function off of a lesson plan document. And so what we're looking at is really the teacher facing material that lives in sort of a static PDF form. And I can migrate to how that looks on our website. But this lesson is part of a 4-part lesson series. And really the idea behind this is that regardless of where you're teaching, even if it's not in a learning garden school or if it has container gardens, this really could be adapted to kind of meet any sort of teaching and learning situation and growing situation. The learning targets that you see here are aligned to the next generation science standards and typically to the disciplinary core ideas versus like a very specific performance standard. So in this particular lesson, really what we're trying to do for kids in the 3 to 5 grade band is help them understand some things about the structure of roots, how roots help the plant, how they're similar and different, and through that process really hone those observation and claim making skills. We'll also spend a little time in some vocabulary today. And so there is an ELA option for the development of domain-specific vocabulary embedded in this lesson. So if you were doing this at school, you would be setting up a lab. And just so you can kind of see, the idea would be that like you yesterday, perhaps, or earlier this week, might have been in your garden and been harvesting some things. Fall's a wonderful time to do a root lesson because we can pull plants out of the garden, either to eat them or because we're going to change over to different crops for the winter. And so you might be setting up these stations where real roots would be displayed and kids could feel them and smell them and touch them. And since that's not the environment we're in today, we're going to try to show how that could be done in a virtual environment. And then the other thing I want to share with you is that in the Ready, Set, Grow series, there is an informational text that goes with each series. So it's called The Garden Times, and this one is about roots. So we would be highlighting some vocabulary for kids, and then they would have an opportunity to annotate or work with this text in whatever way makes most sense for you. Each lesson also has a note-taking option. And here's an example of the one that we would be using today in this lesson. This is just a Word version. When I created the Google Classroom, I tried to create as many options for this lesson as possible, knowing that every district has different things that are allowed and not allowed. So sometimes you'll see a PDF, sometimes you'll see kind of a graphically designed one, sometimes you'll see just like a Word version. And so this would be the one that we would use for the lab today. So you'll see that there would be lab stations, and what we would be guiding kids to do is to create some diagrams or make some observations about the roots and the plants and anything else that we might cue them to do. Where this is going to lead us at the end of the lesson is for students to be able to share their data, compare their data, and then make some, draw some conclusions about how the root structure supports the root function. And you could even extend this by trying to get kids to think about what the root might tell us about where that plant will grow best, or the kind of environment that that plant might need to survive. So as we think about jumping into this lesson, that's sort of the mindset that I'll have you participating with me with today. And then the other thing that I wanted to share with you before we jump into the demo is what this looks like when you go to the website. So the hard copy that I was just referencing is available here. So everything in this series is listed for you and broken out by lesson. The one we're doing today would be the Roots We Eat Science Lab. What came before was an introduction to roots. What could come after is an opportunity to prepare or to think about, in a virtual environment, to think about the different ways that we can eat roots and how they help support our bodies. And then the last lesson in every series is an ELA lesson where kids are able to share what they learned. So in this particular series, this is an informational text piece where kids are able to think about a variety of different ways that they can share. I'll just go in here, where they can share what they know, and to do so in a way that also meets the grade level standard for ELA. So when this populates, what the journal looks like for this section is sort of a graphic organizer that includes things that we would be expecting to see in the 3 to 5 grade band, and then also a checklist that you could use with your students to make sure that they were identifying the critical components of informational writing. And there's one thing that I was just point out here, because it's maybe not clear all the time. This will reference something called Our Food Chronicles. And I've had some questions about what that is. And really, this is sort of an opportunity at the school level to think about how you might want to publish any student writing. It could be virtual, it could be bound, but it would be a really great way to celebrate what kids are learning that might combine with different events that you might be having in school. So those are some things that I wanted to share. I'll also tell you that this morning I did go out into my yard, because as I was thinking about how I would teach this lesson, if it were my students, I probably would go outside. So I did make a little video of what this lesson could look like if videotaped, and actually probably would be something that I would put into my classroom that would allow students to reference that for later. So with that, my view of you is not what I want it to be, so I'm going to change my view. All right, so what I would love is if we could take about the next 10 minutes and ask you to do some role taking. So the role that I'll take is to be the teacher, and I'm going to tell you, I have not been teaching in the time of COVID. So you're all going to have to bear with me, and you're going to be saying, why is she doing that? And then you're going to take on the role of students. And then again, I'm going to say grace, please, because I am sure you have all become expert in dealing with things your students are doing that I have not yet had a chance to hone my skills in. So, but we'll do that learning together. So with that, I'm going to transition into sort of my teacher hat and then invite you to participate, in whatever way makes sense. But you'll be in the role of a 3rd to 5th grade student. That might be fun. All right. So we're going to begin with a tie to yesterday. So if y'all remember yesterday, you saw Mrs. Zeegers out in her backyard, and she was digging through the dirt and finding all kinds of plants, and we were looking at roots. And we also spent some time together reading that article, The Garden Times. We were doing some highlighting, and you learned 2 new words. Or maybe they're not new, but they're new for talking about roots. So those were the 2 kind of roots that we find all plants have. They have one or the other. Does anybody remember the 2 kind of roots that some plants have? You can go ahead and just unmute.
Taproots is one of them.
A taproot is one of them. Wonderful. Does anybody remember the other kind? Well, that's okay, because we're going to demonstrate it. So when we think about a taproot, tap is one of those fun words that has a couple different meanings. So some of you may have heard the word tap like this, right? And this is a sound something makes. But tap has another meaning too, and it has to do with roots, because I'm not sure roots make that sound. But what they do is kind of the shape goes into something, sometimes it's the ground with plants, so that it can pull things out of the water or out of the ground. I'm going to show you a couple examples that you might be familiar with. All right, am I sharing screen? Okay, so has anyone ever seen, you can go ahead and unmute if you have, something like this before? I see some nods. Does anybody know what this is?
When you're tapping a tree for syrup?
That's exactly what it is. And so this works kind of like a tap root. So someone had to tap the tap into the tree, and then it captures the sap that's running through this stem. That's right, the tree's stem. And then it will drain out, and that's what we use to make maple syrup. So that's an example of a tap that exists in the world. And this is a tap that many of us use like all the time. So anytime we turn on the water, somewhere there is a tap that's going into the ground to take that water up. And this is a well, so that person is probably going to pump that out. But when I turn on my faucet, it comes from a very elaborate network of pipes. But somewhere there is a tap that's pulling that water out of the ground. And what we learned yesterday is that's the same job that roots have for the plant. So folks, if we were at school, you know what we would be doing. We'd be having our hands in the dirt, and we'd be looking and comparing and chatting about what we're seeing. But since we're not at school, I'm going to show you some things that I found in my backyard that might help us to figure this out. So in your notes, you can do a couple of things. You can look at your notes and come back and fill them in later. If you want to jot some things down now, you sure can. And in our classroom, there's also a slideshow that has some really great pictures of different types of roots that you can go back and look at if you'd like to spend a little more time. So I'm going to leave it up to you how you want to do your observing, but you might need to use this plus a couple more resources. All right, so I'm going to show you one that I picked out of the ground. I'm going to try to get real close to my camera. This root is connected to this great big plant that I had to use gloves to pull out of the ground. Has anybody ever seen this one before? I pull them out because I don't like my dog to step on them. Anybody know what this? Go ahead.
Is that arugula?
I wish it was arugula. That would make for a good dinner. It kind of looks like arugula. It is a weed. It's a weed called a thistle. And I have a lot of them in my yard because I have a really sunny backyard. It's very hot and a lot of rabbits, and the rabbits don't want to eat these. But I noticed that this is a really long root that has some other roots shooting off of it. So I wonder if we could classify this as a tap root or a fibrous root. I have another one of those. It's much smaller, but the root structure looks about the same. This one I found growing next to my house. So I pulled a lot of these out today. Here's an interesting one. This used to be a kale, but we got really cold weather and now the kale is dying. Wasn't it beautiful though, that purple kale? It's dying. Oh, this is a teacher tip. You got to cover your keyboard because otherwise you get dirt all over your keyboard and then the systems people they get mad. All right, so this is a root ball from a kale. Now, when this plant was bigger, like these leaves were huge, and there's a large woody type of stem. Does anybody want to guess if you think this is a fibrous root or a tap root?
I'm gonna guess it's fibrous because you said a woody stem.
This is fibrous. And what a great opportunity to talk a little bit about fibers. So the root word of fibrous is fiber. And fibers are we can find them in our clothes. In fact, if you looked right now, like at your t-shirt, and you looked kind of real carefully, you could see the fibers. And when we talk about like one fiber, that's not gonna kind of do a lot. But when these fibers come together, they get really strong, just like this piece of burlap. And that's kind of what they're doing for this plant. And that's why they're called fibrous roots, because instead of having sort of like one long one, all of these roots work together. And if I get really close, you might be able to see that there's even some little hairs that come off of these little skinny ones. So this would be kind of an interesting picture to draw. Okay, here's something I found not in my yard. I've never seen anything quite this beautiful come out of my garden. Does anybody know what this is? Probably most of us recognize this as a carrot with the most beautiful tops. This carrot is a root, and it serves several functions for the plant. It's going to hold it in place, so when the winds come, right, the plant doesn't fall down. Rabbits really like these. And it's also got root hair. You see those? That's going to help. Something's happening down here at the bottom. I wonder what's going on there. Interesting story for this carrot. And we can eat these. And the reason we eat them is because another thing that they do for the plant is to store food. So they are good for us. Here's a couple more you might recognize. Here's some roots. Those are a clump that somebody cut off before they went to the grocery store, and that's an onion stem, and we can eat that. I also found this. What kind of a root is this? Does anyone know? This is a very interesting root. I'm not sure I would have called it a root before I learned about roots. And then there's like this little extra root that comes off the bottom. And this is as big as the leaves were on this plant. So we have a really big round root for these kind of like little leaves. I wonder. I'm sorry, say that again?
Is it just a beet?
It looks like a beet. This is probably one of the biggest radishes I have ever seen. But actually in my video earlier today, I called it a beet because that's what it looks like, but beets look a lot like radishes. So this is actually a radish. All right. So with that today, what we were able to do is look at a whole bunch of different types of roots. By the way, we can eat that radish root. I don't think I'm going to eat the thistle though. That will be hard. And so now that we've had that opportunity, I'm going to give you a couple choices. One choice is for you to take that note catcher and think about what we talked about and go ahead and make your observations. Or you can click on the video that I made this morning. Or the third way is if you wanted to look at the slide, and I'll just show you what that looks like so that you can decide if you'd like to spend time with this slide. But this would allow you to kind of slow down and move through. Whoops, what happened to my root lab? This would allow you to slow down a little bit and to be able to observe. And this actually gives you the same questions that your garden journal has. So we didn't even look at corn. Here's some beans. There's those carrots again. So if you wanted to think, oh, dandelions, I have a lot of those in my yard too. So you could use this as a resource if you want to use this for your observation. And if it's safe and an adult gives you permission, you could certainly go outside as well, or you might even find some roots right in the fridge. But make sure to talk to an adult before you go ahead and take those roots or pull anything out of the ground. And then what we'll do after we've had a chance for you to do your observations is we're going to look at them together. So we'll come back together and we'll share our observations, and then we're going to make guesses. So when you're busy doing your observations, what I'm going to ask you to think about is what is that root doing for that particular plant? And then the challenge question is going to be, how does that root and plant need to be cared for in order to be most successful, in order to thrive. And we're going to draw some conclusions about that. And then we're going to even try to test those conclusions. All right. And I will pause now. So that's one way that we could go about doing this lesson in a virtual capacity without having to have kids in the garden. And then as I was thinking about planning for this today, and maybe what I would do, those observations have like tons of extensions. We could have kids measuring them. We could do some experiments to see different types of soil that we could check in on over time. And we could let kids think about how they might want to regenerate some roots like we even were talking about today. I think I will pause here, just looking at time, and I know we want to create some opportunity for questions and answers. So I will pause. I'll turn it back over to the Chicago team. And then if there are questions about access to these materials, I'm happy to share that with you all at the end of the call. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Dianna. That was really a great, it feels very fun to be able to be the student on the other side this time. So thank you so much for modeling that for us. In these last few minutes, we just want to open up the space to connect and share. So using this time to unmute, ask questions, comments, or reflections that you've had seeing that demonstration or anything prior to it with the garlic. What have you all been doing or thinking about in relation to garden-based education in your classrooms? And it's okay not to all jump up at once.
One of the things we've been thinking about is what we can plant and grow while we're not at the school. So the garlic would be great because it'll be something that we can do the video, show how we did it, and then when we get back to school, be able to harvest out the ground. So I had a question for Sam, and I can tell my video is unstable. When you plant just a little bulb versus the whole piece, how much are we getting from the small piece?
So was your question like how much yield, how much the garlic will produce if you're just planting a small clove instead of like a large, like there's different size cloves, and does that have an impact on the size of the whole head of garlic that you'll harvest in the spring? Was that your question? Did I interpret that right?
That's exactly the question. Yes.
So they are related. The garlic is an energy storage part of the plant. So the more energy that there is stored up, the more energy that plant will have to grow vigorously in the spring and produce a large, abundant head in that spring. However, even a small sized garlic will have, under good growing conditions, enough energy to grow vigorously. And most of the energy for the production that's going to come in the spring is going to be coming from fertility in the soil and photosynthesis. And garlic doesn't need a lot of watering, but adequate water, especially when it's growing a lot of leaves in the early spring. So a small or medium-sized bulb, for the most part, will still be able to produce a very nice large head. The one thing, like if you're getting grocery store garlic, a soft neck garlic, and you're getting into the center of the head and those bulbs are tiny, like teeny tiny, I wouldn't plant those. Those I would toss in a separate side bag and I'd eat them for dinner. But the the large or medium-sized cloves should produce in good growing conditions a very large-sized head.
Thanks for that, Sam. Gina asked in the chat if we will be doing garlic distributions. I forgot to mention that we have garlic for you all, and Sam's house will be our garlic distribution site for a week. He's just going to leave the garlic in a rubber tote, and you can go there. It's on the north side. Sam, maybe in the chat you can put your address. On the south side, we have a location at St. Sabina Learning Gardens, and I'll drop that address in the chat. But we will follow up with information with a follow-up email to everyone who joined, so that you can get more information on our distributions and if you would like to pick up garlic. If you are on this call and didn't register for the chat today, we might not have your email information. So if that applies to you, either drop your email in the chat and say, I'm interested in garlic, and we'll add you to our list, or like go through that registration process in the email. So if anyone on this line didn't register, please drop your email in the chat. And we have already reached time. It was so much fun activity today that it really blew by this evening. We want to be respectful of your time because it is precious to be away from the computer for a little bit. So
Alana, I just wanted to make one mention I forgot to say, which is that we're very, very excited. We've actually been working with a translator based in Chicago, and within the next several weeks, all of our Ready, Set, Grow student-facing material will be available in Spanish and loaded into the classroom. So we're really, really happy about that, and so more to come, but we'll be able to share that before the new year and the new growing season.
And I can also add that I spent yesterday and a little bit of today filming and writing 2 garlic recipes I use in my kitchen all the time, and that'll also be followed up in the email, the link to that video and recipe. Oh, one final update as well. We just realized that in the next upcoming workshop scheduled for 11/18, we found out too late that is a conflict with the parent-teacher conferences coming up. So we'll be updating that date to not have anybody have to double book or deal with a meeting out after a full day of talking with families.
I have an announcement also. I won't share the screen. We'll follow up with the information, but we're going to be doing a virtual screening of the film Gather. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's been floating around a lot in social media lately, but it's a documentary that explores Native American food sovereignty. So Big Green will be hosting virtual screenings for a week, and we'll send you information about how to register to get it. But we'll also be providing a film discussion guide for teachers and educators. And then we're also doing an Instagram live interview with one of the young women featured in the film. And that will be happening next Sunday, so November 15th. So if you're someone that likes Instagram, it'll be on that platform, but it will also be recorded and saved. So yeah, that's the film Gather, and we'll be sending more information about that as well.
Thanks so much, everybody. Of course, if you have any other questions about teaching some of these garden lessons or garlic or anything else at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can join our next chat, or we're always happy to talk gardening with you all. Thanks so much for making the time to be with us this evening, and good luck with everything.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.